The Mishnah, towards the bottom of Chavav and Beis, says, Shofar Rosh Hashanah shel Yoel Pashat. The shofar that's best to use for Rosh Hashanah should come from a Yoel. A Yoel is the Ibex, Pashat, a straight-horned Ibex. So the Ibex has a straight horn, and that's the best shofar to use for Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah continues with a few details about the shofar Rosh Hashanah. Then the Mishnah says, "V'tainiyos shel zacharim kafufim." On tainis, when you blow shofar, you have to use the bent horn of a ram. In the time of Chazal, and possibly even a little bit afterwards, there was a thing called the tainis tzibur, which is discussed extensively in Masechtas Tainis. And on that tainis, they used to also blow shofar. Which kind of shofar? According to the Tana of our Mishnah, they blew a ram's horn. Which ram's horn? A bent ram's horn. That's the Tana Kama. Yehuda argues, and he offers a different variation of what horns were used. And then in the Braisa, later down the bottom of the Amid, there's a third opinion as to which horns should be used for Rosh Hashanah and which for Tainis. And there's one more case which comes up in the Sugya, and that's Yovel. Which horn is used for Yovel? And there's three opinions. There's the Tanakama, which is Yoel on Rosh Hashanah, and a Zachar Kafuf for Tainis. We really want to focus on the Yoel Pashat and the Zachar Kafuf. It's not so important which shita I'm working with. It's more the terms that the Mishnah uses that I want to talk about. What's the point of a Kafuf and what's the point of a Pashat? So the Gemara gives svaris. The idea of Pashat is that you're straight, you're straightforward, you're together with Hashem, you're one, you're open and honest with the Eibishter. Whichever shita, whichever time you're using it, that would be the idea of Pashat. The idea of Kafuf is the idea of submission, subjugation. Again, whichever time you're using the Kafuf, it's the idea of that you're subjugated and submitted to the Eibishter. The halacha, the Rambam paskins like the Braisa, that on Rosh Hashanah, the shofar of choice is the ram's horn, a bent ram's horn. In fact, the Rambam says that's the only horn you're ever allowed to use. The Shulchan Aruch says l'chatchila to do like the Rambam, to use a bent ram's horn. If there's no bent ram's horn available, so b'diavad you can use any horn. The Mishbru says that included in a ram's horn, a second type of ram's horn would be a goat's horn. So here I have a goat horn. If you're not so familiar, you might not be able to tell the difference in a goat horn and a ram's horn if it's not on the head of the animal. But if you do want to know more about it, we have a chapter about that in the book, how to tell the difference in a goat horn and a ram horn. Okay, so here's an unfinished goat horn that even still has the bone inside. And here is a processed, finished goat horn. It doesn't look exactly like a ram's horn. It doesn't look the same. Let's contrast a goat horn tekiah with a ram's horn tekiah. Goat first. Now the ram's horn. This is the kudu horn. This is the type of horn that you see in all the postcards. The fella that has, Anyway, the kudu is not a ram. According to the Rambam, you totally cannot use this on Rosh Hashanah. According to the Mechaber, it's certainly not a preferred type of horn. It would be kosher b'diavad if you have nothing else available. So if you're looking to make a postcard, this is what you want. But for Rosh Hashanah, you want to get yourself a ram's horn. I want to focus on the Yoel Pashut and the Zachar Kafuf. The Yoel is the Ibex. The Ibex is a pretty popular animal. It lives wherever people live. It's Asia, Africa, Europe. It's even in America. It's a pretty popular animal. Why did the Mishnah have to tell me that it's a Yoel Pashut? If you just tell me Yoel, and I know that use the Yoel horn, I'm going to be using a Pashut horn. Why did the Mishnah tell me that a Zachar is a Kafuf? If Zachar, the ram's horns, are Kfufim, just tell me Zachar, and I know they're Kfufim. Well, obviously the Mishnah is trying to also tell me the idea that the Gemara says later, that Do you want to be pashut because you're representing a certain idea of straightforwardness, oneness with Hashem, and Kafuf is the idea of subjugation and submission. So the Mishnah did have to mention the idea of Kafuf and pashut, but maybe the opposite. Maybe just say Kafuf and just say pashut, because that's the idea anyway, and leave out the yael. If a person needs a straight horn, he knows where to go. If a person needs a bent horn, he knows where to go. That's one question. The other question is, and this is something that's been on the minds of many, many contemporary writers, is that the yael, the Ibex, does not have a straight horn, any more than the ram has a bent horn. The yael's horn starts from its forehead and curves backwards down to its shoulder, and usually rings around lower than its shoulder. It doesn't twist and turn like some other animal horns, but it certainly is not a straight horn. And the ram's horn also, if you had to name the shape of a ram's horn, I wouldn't call it bent. Twisted, curled, but not bent. So why does the Mishnah identify the yael as a straight horn and the ram as a bent horn? I think the two questions answer themselves. The yael's horn is not straight, and that's why the Mishnah has to say both. So what does it mean then that you have to use a straight horn of a yael? What's interesting about animal horns, let's grab this ram's horn. You see over here, there's a piece of bone inside the horn. Under the proper circumstances, usually by boiling it, but sometimes you can just let it age and it will pop out by itself, or if you give it a nice bang, it will pop out, the bone comes out. Line them up. The bone is much shorter than the horn. Only the area of the horn where the bone was in is hollow. The remainder of the horn is solid. How much of it is hollow, how much of it is solid, that depends on the animal, it depends on the age, it depends on the breed. There's a lot of factors in how much is solid and how much is hollow. But every horn that grows like this, on what we call horns, not an antler, what we call horns, every one is the same. It has a piece of bone and a hollow sheath of keratin. Keratin is the same kind of scientific material that your fingernails are made of. It's the same stuff as fingernails, as hooves, and it works the same way. It gets wet, it gets soft. That's why if you boil it, you can bend its shape. And half of it is hollow, half of it is solid. You can only use the hollow part to blow. So how do you make a shofar out of this? So what they'll do is, they'll boil it or put it into a gas jet, and it makes it soft. And using the right kind of clamps, you can untwist it or straighten it a little bit, and you know what the shofar looks like. And you could straighten it a little bit. You can't really straighten it. You can't turn a ram's horn into the kudu horn, and you can't turn a kudu horn into this. You can't even turn a ram's horn into this, and you can't turn a goat horn into a standard ram shofar. You only can bend it a little bit depending on how much material you have, but you can't really alter the shape. The Ibex, the majority of the horn is solid and useless and pointless. You can't hollow that part out to make it into a blowable piece. So when you want to use an Ibex horn, only the first, depending how long the horn is, only the first couple of inches, maybe 10, 12, 15 inches are hollow and usable as a horn. The rest of it is useless. When you want to make a shofar out of an Ibex horn, you would cut off the first 10, 12 inches that are hollow, with another 2-3 inches that are solid that you can drill through and create a mouthpiece. Now, if you take that piece, which is only now, let's say, 12, 15 inches, and you put it down flat, it's not perfectly straight. I wouldn't call it ramrod straight, but it's certainly not bent. And that's probably what the Mishnah means. A yael pashut means you take the yael horn, the part of it that's usable, and you use that to create a shofar. That will be more or less a straight horn. What does zechar kafuf mean? Here's a ram's horn. Be'erich, the position, it would be on the ram's head, from my angle, or maybe how it would look like from your angle. the ram's horn curls, it twists, but it's definitely not the shape that I would call bent. The ram's horn, I'm taking a guess, this horn is probably hollow till the point where my finger is, and the rest of it is probably solid. If you wanted to use this part of a shofar, you'd have to boil it, untwist it, and then you have a nice shofar, similar to some of the other shofars. Here we have a classical shofar, where this part is the natural curl. From here on has been straightened. The natural hollow, holding it up to the light, the natural hollow went until around here, until around where my finger is. That was naturally hollow. This part was curled. The shofar maker untwisted it, and then using a very long drill bit, was able to drill a hole this way. The longer channel makes a nicer sound, and that's why he wanted a longer channel. The Ibex, the horn is much thicker, much stronger, and it serves no point to have that extra part. So if you wanted to use an Ibex horn as a shofar, you would the hollow section, a few inches, 2-3 inches of the solid section that you want to work with to make a mouthpiece, and after that, the rest of the horn is useless. So that's why the Ibex can be considered a straight horn. On the ram's horn, this part is much more valuable because it helps produce the sound. Therefore, it's worth the work, the effort, to straighten it. Now, this horn was straightened by putting it into a gas jet, and I can tell it was straightened by the gas jet because right over here, I see a burn mark. These orange marks that you occasionally find on shofars, usually only on the larger shofars, but often you find it around the mouthpiece, are burn marks. They heat the shofar when it's still in the raw state, like this. That this way, most of the burn happens on the raw part, which anyways get taken off when they polish it. But sometimes it leaves a few scars that were a little deeper remain. It's a lot of work to straighten this. In fact, I went to interview somebody recently whose father made shofars back in the 50s, and he had a heart condition, and he could no longer do the strenuous work involved in straightening the shofars. So he hired somebody who described that looked more like a wrestler to straighten the shofars for him. The guy worked one day and quit. He said, it's not humanly possible to do that kind of physical work, to straighten out the shofars. So it is a lot of work. And that's pretty common today. They only straighten out one little section of it, and they leave the bell area in its natural shape. This is what shofars look like 50 to 100 years ago. This shofar itself is probably from pre-World War. And this is double or triple the amount of work that goes into straightening the shofar. And the question is, why did people bother doing that? To flatten it like this. All shofars on record, no matter which country they came from, no matter what period in history they came from, back to drawings from the time of Bayis Sheni, all show a shofar that looks like this. Museum pieces that are 500 years old or more, all show a shofar in this shape. Why did they go through all the hard work to create this shaped shofar when they could just have left the shofar like we showed earlier, just leave the bell and straighten out the mouthpiece? The answer is because they wanted a shofar which is Kafuf. This natural horn is twisted, it's curled, but it's not Kafuf, it's not bent. This horn is bent. So if you're trying to show the idea that you want to submit yourself and subjugate yourself and bend yourself before Hashem, this shofar represents that. A shofar like this, or like this shofar, which is called a natural shaped shofar, does not show the idea of a bent and submissive shofar. This one shows it very nicely. This would be pshat in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking probably about a shofar that looks like this, and that was the Zcharim Kafufim. It's a ram's horn which was manipulated to make it look bent, to make it look like it's bent over. That was the idea the Mishnah is trying to convey. A ram's horn, which is bent. How about if you use a ram's horn which is not bent, it's in natural shape? So the Mechaber implies that way, the Mishmur says it clearly, that any horn, even if it's not bent, is still kosher. So if you have a natural shaped shofar, which was not manipulated at all, or what might be considered the standard or the classic shofar of today, which is a natural shape on the bell and straightened down on the mouthpiece, it may not be bent, but it's kosher because the Mechaber says any shofar is kosher, even if it's not bent. So our questions had been, why did the Mishnah have to emphasize that the yoel is pashut and the zachar is kafuf? And that's because that a yoel's horn, in the full size of the horn, in the real sized horn, is not really a pashut horn, it's curved. And the Mishnah is telling you to only use the part which can be cut off and used as pashut. Not perfectly pashut, but more or less pashut. And the ram's horn, the Mishnah wanted one which was manipulated and bent to look like a bent horn, rather than a shofar which was natural, with twisted and curled, but not bent.